In the first video of this series, Brandon Weeby invited you to identify the primary context you feel Jesus might be identifying for you. This is the people or the place where you'll invest your time and energy into disciple making. Now, whether you have full awareness of what that place is or whether you are still narrowing that down between a few contexts, there's another tool we will offer you now that will help you go deeper once you have. This tool is called the neighboring map. Pathak, one of the authors of The Art of Neighboring, will give you some background on how this idea developed and how you can use this in your disciple-making journey.
Hey, my name is Pathak, and I'm here in sunny Denver, Colorado, and I'm excited to share with you a little bit about really it's just a journey in my own life, the life of my family, my wife and I, and really what it is to truly fulfill the Great Commandment. I have been doing ministry my entire adult life. I came to know Jesus radically, and I wanted people to know Jesus. Like, I wanted people to know the life that I had found in Jesus. And I'm so grateful for the mentors, the leaders in my life. I kind of fell in with this large church, and they figured out that I had such a heart for people to know Jesus that I ended up in what is just sort of like classic evangelism, right? In a large church, which was doing big gatherings. So I would host, kind of set up these like concerts or a pizza party or, different things where the idea was people in our church would bring their friends and there would be a reason for them to come. And then when we had them all gathered, we would Jesus them, like we would, there'd be a pizza eating contest and then we'd be like, Jesus or whatever, or a big concert. And then somebody'd stand up and say, some of you maybe need to know about what life is for, or what, okay. And so I remember my life really changing in what I want to talk to you about today on one specific night where I'd set up this huge concert. We had flyers, we had fog machines and lights and lasers. And it was supposed to be for about 1,500, 2,000 people, something like that. And if you've ever run one of these things, you know the experience I'm about to say, which is everything's set up, we're ready to go. And it slowly occurs to me, I wonder if anybody's coming. We've ever had this experience. So I remember just calling all my friends, being like, you got to get here. Bring your friends, because I'm pretty much thinking I'll get fired if we do all this and nobody comes. Well, sure enough, we get to the concert, and I think we had like 150, 200 people. And we were set up for 1,500, 2,000 people. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to get fired. And I remember grabbing my buddies and saying, hey, let's go to this barbecue place and you guys can help me think about what my next job's going to be. And I remember we walk in this barbecue place and it is packed, full of people. And I go up to the hostess, I go, why is it so crowded? She said, we have this crazy idea where we have a band come and play. And then all these people come to see the music, and then they stick around, they have barbecue. And it occurs to me as I'm standing at that host stand, the exact gathering I was trying to manufacture, maybe only a few minutes away, someone else was doing, and they were like way more effective than me. And I remember standing there thinking to myself, instead of going to where people already are, I'm trying to create another environment to bring them to where I am. And, I'm sure you've had moments like this, but it was one of those moments where I was like, I'm supposed to be learning something here, but I can't quite process it. Something's wrong, but I'm not sure what. Anyway, a few weeks later, I'm still working at the church, doing what I know how to do. And I had what amounted to like a few bad pastor days in a row. If you've been around a larger church, there's interns, people lower on the totem pole, and you end up doing all the work nobody else wants to do. So sure enough, I'd had a few days of really hard ministry. I did a kid's funeral. I'd been in a few conversations with couples that were processing divorce. It was rough. And I remember after a few days of this, it occurred to me as I was getting ready to go home, oh no, it's small group night. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. And so I called my wife and I was like, we can't do small group because we hosted it. And she said, well, we have to do small groups in a few hours. I said, no, we don't have to. We just cancel. I mean, I'm exhausted. I don't want to be around any other humans. And I remember being on the phone with her and being like, well, Jay, like it's in a few hours. You can't cancel. I was like, well, you can. You'd be amazed at how easy it is. You just cancel. And we go back and forth on this. And finally, we compromise on a fellowship night. Have you ever done this? If everybody comes, you bring an item, we'll have like a potluck. And, it's a little less intense. I thought, all right. And I remember pulling up to my apartment, sitting there a minute, just being like, kind of trying to get myself up for the evening. Like, it's okay, come on, you can do this. And as I walked up to my apartment, I noticed there were strangers everywhere, all these people. And I'm like, who are these people? I didn't recognize them. As I got closer, I realized they were going in and out of my apartment. So I'm like, what is this? And I walk in my apartment and I look over on my couch and I see a guy playing my guitar. So I walked over and said, hey, that's my guitar. He said, oh, you must be Jay. Here's what had happened. My wife had rolled the grill outside. And while people were coming home from work to our apartment, she said, hey, we're having folks over tonight. Why don't you just grab something out of your fridge, come on down, share it with everyone, and hang out with us. And it was that night that we both realized we didn't know our neighbors. We had no idea who these people were. We couldn't pick them out of a lineup. But that night changed our life because we started becoming like the pastors of this apartment complex. We helped somebody through a marriage challenge. We helped another couple in a domestic violence thing. We helped another couple folks through a recovery process, and people started to follow Jesus, were around us. And here's what occurred to me. We were used to getting in our cars to go elsewhere to do ministry. Well, we didn't even know the people that were surrounding us. And so those two incidences together, kind of close to each other, mess with me. And all of a sudden it started to occur to me, there's something not right here. And I don't know if this has happened to you before. I bet it has, where you go to read the Bible and all of a sudden there's a word or two or a phrase or a theme that's been there the whole time, but because of your life circumstances, you see it differently. And that's what happened to my wife and I. I went to go read the Bible, and all of a sudden this one little word kept appearing. Neighbor. Jesus says, all the law and the prophets are summed up in this. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets are summed up in this. And I had the horrible realization that not only did I not love my neighbors, I couldn't have picked them out of a lineup. I didn't know what they looked like. And this, what is commonly called the Great Commandment, is repeated regularly through the Bible. And yet it was something that I obviously wasn't living up to, or frankly had considered. This changed us, and we've used a little tool that I'd like to try with you right now, which is effectively just a tic-tac-toe board. And if your house is in the middle of that board, we're going to do it right now. What you can do is write the names of your neighbors in these squares that surround them. So right now you can do it. You draw it on a piece of paper, do it in your mind. Who is it that lives across the street, behind you, catty corner, side to side? Write their names. You can just do that right in the top of the box, write their names. Now, remember, one of the contexts in which Jesus challenges us to love our neighbor is found in Luke 10. It's when a teacher of the law comes to him and says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus says, well, I don't know. You know the law. What's it say? The teacher of the law says, well, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus says, yeah, do this and you'll live. And here's the key line. The very next verse, it says, but the teacher of the law said, wanting to justify himself. It's a key line. Who is my neighbor? See, the intensity, the clarity of Jesus' teaching was so clear that he had to find a way to wriggle out of it. He's a lawyer. What does that word mean, really? What's a neighbor, And that's when Jesus tells a story, famous story that many people have heard, most people know, even if you've not been raised in church. It's called the parable of the Good Samaritan. Man's beat up on the side of the road. The two right people that should help him pass him by on the other side of the road. And the bad guy of the story, the Samaritan, modern day translation might be a terrorist, sees him, goes over, picks him up, tends to his wounds, takes him to the modern day equivalent of a hospital, pays his bill. And Jesus ends the story and says, and who was the neighbor to the man? And the lawyer, who is frustrated, says, I don't know, I suppose the one who cared for him. He says, well, you should go and do likewise. Have you been doing your chart this whole time? I was stalling so you could do your chart. The names of the people that surround you. Okay. Most people that do this can't do it. They might know one or two, but they definitely don't know all 8. Now, remember, Jesus says, all the law and the prophets have summed up this. Love God, love your neighbors yourself. Teacher of the law says, well, what's a neighbor? He says, okay, you're right. A neighbor could be anyone you come across in need, even if they're your enemy. I'd like to suggest that's graduate level neighboring. What if we could back up and we just do kindergarten, which is just knowing and retaining the names of the people that surround us? Now be careful, because many times when we do an exercise like this, people make the move that the lawyer makes, which is to seek to justify yourself. I'm sure even right now, some of you are like, well, but this map doesn't look like my neighborhood. I'm in an apartment, or there's a park behind me. Listen, don't be a legalist. Just pick the 8 closest people. Say, what are their names? And we might want to go further. There's some of you that are like, no, I know that. You could go further and say, okay, so what is it you know about them? Like, what are some attributes of their life? Is a lawyer, is from Idaho, loves to golf, whatever. Be careful. Don't just fill in things you can see, like drives a red car, cheating, something that would require that you've gotten to know them. And then maybe in the bottom of each square, if you want to fill this in, what's their spiritual condition? What do they love? What do they hate? What do they regret? What do they hope for in life? See, loving means that you know what makes people tick. Loving people means you care about them. Loving means you've prayed for them. Loving means you're invested in knowing more about who they are. But at the very least, loving people means, this is a big theological statement I'm about to make, knowing and retaining people's names. Listen, there's so many people that want to live missionally impactful lives. They want their lives to count. They want the life of Jesus, the hope of the kingdom of Jesus Christ to be found in people's lives. And they'll go to great lengths to do that. But what if it's possible that Jesus is a genius and he's given us a way to connect to and care for people near us that if every follower of Jesus took it seriously, it could ripple across our cities, across our world. Maybe we start with just 8. But then what if we get to know our whole block or our street? Or what if some of those people start to follow Jesus with us and we care for those near us? Listen, you don't have to be a follower of Jesus to see how important this is. Most local governments are doing everything they can to get people to know and connect to their neighbors. The stats sociologically are shocking. If you know the names of your neighbors and you have a means of calling them, the crime rate will drop, usually by about half in your area. Why? Because if something's wrong, you call that person. Imagine you're going home tonight and you see like somebody's legs go into the window of a house next to you. You just see their feet go through. What do? Well, if you don't know who they are, you're like, I don't know, it could be their kid or maybe it's them. I don't know. If you know them, you call them and go, I just saw somebody climbing your window. Is everything okay? That one move makes a huge difference for the safety in a neighborhood. When someone's strange walking around your house, you can call them. And by the way, if right now you're realizing, I don't know their number to call them, I wouldn't be able to call to make sure that their home is secure or their family is safe. I wouldn't even know, and I'd probably not because I wouldn't know what to do. If you don't know how to do that, you know what that means? It means they don't know how to do that for you either. That means something weird could be happening in your home and no one would even call you, let alone the police. So this has sociological implications, but is way more than that. I mean, what it means to truly represent Jesus in the world is to learn to love people. There's a huge difference between, hey, bro, dude, how about those Nuggets? Champs, by the way, NBA champs. There's a big difference between, hey, bro, dude, how about those Nuggets? And, hey, Joe, last time I talked to you, your mom wasn't doing so well. How's she doing? I know you went back to Florida to check in. Big difference between that. Or, hey, Sally, how about this weather? And then, hey, Sally, I know the kids were starting in a new school. How's that been going? The context of creating awareness of the people that are around us fulfills and lives out the Great Commandment. It means taking the Great Commandment literally. Listen, I know that this doesn't make the person in need any less your neighbor. All I'm saying is, could we start where we're at? Could we start by loving and serving and connecting the people nearest to us and allowing that life and that hope to radiate out? Because, man, I think if every person who loved and followed Jesus took just this simple thought seriously, they knew the people near them, they prayed for them, they made space to maybe even share a meal with them, have them in their home, the context by which we could care for and love people would be so robust that there'd be a means, there'd be a connecting point by which Jesus could live through us, through our communities, through our churches, to reach to people that may never come to our churches, but would have an opportunity to be near a person who loves and follows Jesus. So you can start with that block map. I think that's a good way to start. That block map is a good tool. But begin to ask God, how can I just take one small step? How do I do one more thing to move down the line toward loving my neighbors and to take the Great Commandment literally? Thanks for listening, and may God be with you as you continue on this journey.
While the context map helps us identify the place where we feel Jesus specifically calling us in our disciple-making journey, the neighboring map will help us see where the gaps are and how well we know the people in that particular place. Then we can take intentional steps to get to know the ones we don't know yet and know in deeper ways the ones we do know. While this map can work really well in a physical neighborhood, we have found that many people do not necessarily feel a calling to a geographical location. That is, their context might be a workspace or a third space where it's not as easy to draw 8 houses and fill in names and details about the people in those houses. That's okay. It's great, in fact, because many of us don't live in a perfect little suburban neighborhood. The tool still works, but you'll just have to be a little more creative.
Yeah, we've seen hundreds of missionary leaders use this tool for the purpose of getting to know the people to whom they've been sent. For instance, we've seen some draw this tool for an office space and use the boxes that might represent houses to represent cubicles. Some have used this tool to represent the people they're connected to in a hobby where they spend significant hours each week. Contextualize the tool for the people or place where you have a clear sense of calling. And we do want to pause here and offer a caution again. If we're not careful, using tools like these can lead us to see people as projects. Please don't use these tools in that way. We never want to mistake people for objects to be moved across some arbitrary finish line. They are beautiful creations to be loved, just as we have been loved.
The purpose of the neighboring map is to help us remember details about the people in our lives. We can't love people well if we don't know them intimately. The neighboring map also helps us to pray more specifically and meaningfully for them by name with specific needs we've learned through engaging meaningful conversations. If you want to go further with the neighboring map, pick up a copy of The Art of Neighboring by J. Pathak and Dave Runyon.